Sorry, everybody. Thanks very much for holding on. I don't think he's here. I think what we might do, if that's all right, Morgan, we might just continue the conversation, and hopefully he's going to come in at some stage. So if anybody notices that he has entered the room, please, let us know if I miss. It's hard to keep an eye on every attendee who's here. Morgan, you were just to finish off maybe on that point on we're looking at Iran's capabilities and what this means. Like, a lot of people are wondering what's next. Is this some people are saying the beginning of World War III, some people are saying we're already stuck in World War III. But another thing that maybe didn't come up already, and Seyed, maybe you'll come in this, and we'll bring Colin in as well because you had your hand up, Colin, is that, what's the reason for it? Barry said, well, it boils down to oil, it boils down to US hegemony. But I'm thinking of Professor Marandi was here. He often talks about the Greater Israel Project. So he talks about the Zionist entity as well as the Epstein class. So Morgan, maybe before we move off, if you could even just talk to us about, the nature of Zionism and what that means, because I think there still is, it's a term that causes a lot of problems for some people. So even just as a definition, why is there still a reluctance amongst perhaps even the pro-Palestine movement to be, unapologetically anti-Zionist? Sorry, putting you on the spot now, Morgan.
You don't often, yeah, but I think you have, because I don't want to upset very many of the people in this, in this group that are probably part of the pro-Palestine groups, because I have a lot of friends that are still in it, but the reticence is always in the, the people, the kind of self-appointed leaders of those groups, more so than the actual, attendees. Most people just go to those kind of protests to learn more, to feel better, to kind of offer solidarity. But, in terms of people that actually wanted to kind of agitate or use the movement for, a wider political progressive campaign that could actually affect change here, they've kind of, they've dissipated. They no longer really follow. I won't say too much about that. In fact, I suppose just on the nature of Zionism, really, you can't really speak about it without just referencing its absolute savagery. Like, we discussed that attack on that school I think in the south of Iran earlier, and even in the last 24 hours, because of what clearly is, frustration that their war goals aren't being achieved, and that they appear to be overpowered by Iranian missiles, that they've started carpet bombing civilian quarters in Tehran. So attacking apartment complexes, wide-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure in Tehran, and probably a great loss of life. But it's not deterring the Iranians. It's sad to see it, but at the from the very distant setting that we are in Ireland, it's still heartening to see that they are steadfast and overcoming the Western attack on their country. Now, what Iran is doing as well now, they've obviously in the last 24 hours, they've increased what their, what weapons they're using, particularly in East Iraq, but also in Israel itself. So at the moment, they've moved on to using cluster munitions on some of the Israeli cities. And the level of destruction there is obviously quite great as well, I'd imagine. Now, information control is extremely impressive at the moment on both sides. It is very difficult to get a strong grasp of what's happening there. And like no other war before, in the first 48 hours, there were countless stories of great significance that were walked back after 3 hours, after 6 hours, because of the level of, disinformation that's been put out there. Obviously, now that's to do with psychological operations, primarily coming from the West on the Iranian people, but it's just not working. And it won't work. But even from where we are as well, previously trusted sources are no longer really useful. So, like, I referenced Live UA Map recently in one of our group chats, and Live UA Map was a source of information that was slanted, obviously, on the Syrian war, but it's been it is quite useful in order to kind of keep up with what was happening there. And most recently in the war in Ukraine as well, it's been a very useful source of information. However, in this particular war over this particular weekend just gone, studying the Live UA Map is almost as if you're reading, Israeli military propaganda. And I think it was mentioned earlier, like, for example, the only strike that's been attributed to Iran that they're actually referencing on Live UA Map over the last 24 hours or so is a supposed Iranian attack on the Aramco oil refinery, which was referenced earlier. Now, I'm not actually convinced that was Iran. Because some of the evidence pointing towards it not being Iran is the fact that it's been carried on this Zionist propaganda website on the war, being attributed to Iran. So that's something that maybe might be walked back in the next 24 hours. I'm waiting for kind of Iranian officials to kind of address that. So we'll see how that goes. Now, there we go. Well, I suppose in the wider kind of issue, this is obviously the West's last chance to curb the expansion of Chinese influence and retain or grow their own influence in West Asia as well. So that speaks of that's kind of why they're so desperate and why they're pouring everything into it. But because Iran has been so clever in protracting a longer war and thereby attacking their logistics and supply lines, this might be their last war of great significance for a great length of time in the region. Because if Iran are successful in dismantling these logistics in the region, then it will take many, many years and quite a lot of concessions that they're no longer able to make in order to get kind of reestablish a firm foothold that they had in the last couple of years there. Because it's very difficult to know what's going to happen to the Gulf monarchies. It's very difficult to know what's going to happen in Iraq. Even in Syria, it's very difficult to know what will happen anywhere. So everything is on a knife edge, and the allies of the Americans might be less willing to throw their lot in with them, even if they ride out the storm. So realistically, and I'm leaning towards this kind of favorable outcome, that this might be the last hurrah or the last firefight that the Americans are really engaging in the region of great significance for a long period of time, and it's not before time. And a tremendous amount of credit needs to go to, I suppose, the Iranian officials and generals of the IRGC. Before them, even General Soleimani, you can say that he's that many of the current generals will probably be, students of his in a way. And in years to come, he will be regarded as a great hero in the region. If indeed they manage to liberate themselves, which I certainly hope and predict. So, stepping outside a little bit more and going towards the West and just seeing just the contradictions that have risen between now and maybe even this time last year. It wasn't even a year ago that Trump was entertaining Zelensky in the Oval Office, and before an international audience, he was chastising him, claiming that he's gambling with World War III. So what's changed in the last year? So obviously, and I think Dara will speak to this later perhaps, but obviously there is a great amount of blackmail going on. I would love to know what because it's not just Trump. It's obviously like the whole administration is being blackmailed. The whole political system in America is being blackmailed. The key people are being blackmailed. And it doesn't matter what kind of rhetoric they come out with. Ultimately, they are beholden to this, this dark force that's directing Washington, and therefore also Europe and the entire imperial West. And even looking at earlier today, we saw images coming from Washington before Trump's delayed address. Now, I wonder why that was delayed for an hour as well, given the cameras were rolling. I'd imagine that there was a lot of panic going on in the Trump administration. Pete Hegseth looks like he's lost his mind. He doesn't look comfortable at all with a camera in front of him at the moment. Obviously, then you move to Europe. the UK, and you see Starmer looks like drastically uncomfortable. Macron seems to be tripping over himself, saying that, oh yeah, the French will get involved. I haven't heard much from Italy, even though they've lost 20 troops already in the first day of action. So, you know, again, the West looks very disjointed. It doesn't look like it knows what it's doing. It looks like it's trying to kind of react to this unexpected Iranian response. And they clearly don't have the skill sets, the knowledge, and probably even the motivation to actually overcome Iran. So whatever way this war ends, I hope that it will be on Iranian terms. I predict that it will be on Iranian terms. And the longer it goes on, the less of a foothold the West will have in the region. So inshallah, that is the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Morgan, for that synopsis and overview. We'll call on Morgan. I just want to check. I'm not familiar with the layout of this Teams, but I don't see Professor Marandi. If you're there, please let us know. It's very worrying as well when, you just don't know the circumstances, but we'll continue. Dara, I'm going to go to you, and then Colin, if you're there. I don't know, I can't see who's attending either. The screen's not allowing me to see who's here. But Dara, can we bring you in, please, maybe to talk? You've done an awful lot of research on the Epstein files, and if Professor Marandi were here, I'm sure he would have, by 15 minutes into the program, I'm sure he would have spoken about the Epstein class. He uses it a lot. I think he's coined the phrase. Dara, why would Professor Marandi and others now use a phrase to describe this class of people as the Epstein class, in your opinion?
Hello.
Hi, Dara.
Thank you for having me on, and I think that was a great intro from Morgan there as well. And yeah, with this Epstein class, as it's being called, so I've been going into this a lot deeper in the past weeks and just trying to understand this network and how it works. And it's been called many different things, from the Epstein class. It's being referred to as the parasite class, or perhaps best accurately, the predator class. And I think we firstly just need to understand this network in a few different ways, where firstly, where it stems from is through organized crime, going back to Prohibition era in the States, and in reality, long before that, we could go back to the transnational slave trade if we wanted to. And what is this network really about is about creating and maintaining the conditions for extraction, and also to try to understand the global capitalist system really as a system of circulation, that this network are very involved in speeding up, you could say, so that they can sort of keep their ability to extract at ever increasing rates in place. And what are they really responsible most for circulating is money, particularly through tax havens, including Ireland, weapons, as well as people through human trafficking. So when we're thinking of what this network are looking to do, I think the best way to think of it, and where a lot of this network's power comes from, is through the Cold War and their incredibly close links with the intelligence, really with what is the axis of evil in this world, from the United States, the CIA, to MI5, MI6 in England, to Mossad in Israel. And really from the get-go of Israeli intelligence and the CIA, this network are part of the founding groups. So when we think about what this network really are, there's a term that you often hear in economics with regards to the capitalist system called the invisible hand. And this is actually a term that Yoav Gallant used as the invisible hand in the Iranian protests in January, which really was the CIA on Mossad. And it's this exact same network that is still going today, and they have their men in Trump, in Netanyahu, really in the world's leading positions of power now. So it's not just Epstein, it's really a global transnational elite. And what this dynamic really started off with is class war that's on a global scale now. And we have this basically predator-prey relationship where we have a sort of hyper core of criminals who are increasingly extracting the world's resource in a way that is really just killing the host, as every successful parasite eventually does. So when we look at this class war and we look at, for example, pedophilia and all of the rape and blackmail and other disgusting acts that they are involved in, so part of this is really a form of class unity that they have to be able to sort of have this mutual system of blackmail so that, firstly, the world's most evil men are able to trust each other in some way and collaborate in a way that is effective relative to the division that they have sowed throughout the world to prevent a sort of class or internationalist unity on behalf of the global majority. So in terms of this division, the strategy really is typically to sort of try to firstly de-develop any country or economy that is resisting the global system of imperialism, to destabilize them and then ultimately to destroy. And we see that now happening in Iran since the so-called 12-day war. They went on a campaign really of outright destabilization, in particular through the currency, and really tried to destroy Iran economically as best as possible, destabilize as much as they could internally before launching this invasion that we're seeing now. And the plan for this invasion goes back to at least the 90s, written by a man called Richard Pearl, who wrote Operation Clean Break for Netanyahu in his first term as prime minister in 1996. Richard Pearl was caught leaking US intelligence to the Israelis in the 70s. And yet he went on to become a vital part of the US Defense Administration under Reagan and crucially under George Bush during the Iraq War, where it was really Richard Pearl and Doug Feith who were the so-called architects of the Iraq War as part of really Israeli strategy to expand and ultimately really to take over the Middle East, which they're now blatantly saying. This interview, even with Huckabee, the US ambassador to Israel during the week, he probably said a bit too much in this interview with Tucker Carlson and said that they can take it all if they wanted to, in his words.
Dara, sorry to interrupt you right now, but I think we have Professor Mohammad Marandi with us. So yeah, is that right, Professor? Can you hear us? Professor Marandi, I'm so sorry to interrupt, Dara. If you can unmute.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great we can't see you, Professor Marandi. I don't know if our settings aren't right. Can you speak again?
My camera is on and my video is on
and we
too.
can see you. We can see you.
Oh, great.
Okay.
To see you now. Professor Marandi, it's an absolute honor to be in your company tonight. And we started a program at 8 o'clock because we had scheduled this and we went ahead, and it's just important. The first thing we want to do is we want to send our condolences from Ireland to, on the martyrdom of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Al-Khamenei. And we want to extend as well our revolutionary greetings to you and the people of Iran, and to remember all of the martyrs as well. And we are very honoured to be in your presence, and people from Ireland, and given our revolutionary history here ourselves, we have a strong sense of anti-imperialism and of revolution and of rebellion, and we continue and persist to fight to this day ourselves. We are with you, and we invite you now to tell us, I suppose, how the situation looks right now. We have the utmost respect for you because we've been following you for a long time, but particularly over the last 48 hours, it's been non-stop, and you must be exhausted. So we don't want to exhaust you too much either, but I suppose we do have questions, and we do want to know what Iran is planning next and how your beautiful people are holding up and continue to fight for humanity, not just for Iran.
Well, thank you very much for the very kind words, and thank you for accepting my delay. I was forced to go on Iranian television. I promised them under duress to go on TV. I told them that I have a commitment at this time, but they insisted, so I went across the city. And actually, they were the studio that I was supposed to go to was targeted last night, and so they took me to a different studio. And the Israeli regime has issued a warning that they're going to target Iranian national radio and television tonight. So this is the world that we live in, that radio and television stations can be targeted and no one will complain about it. No one will condemn it. The Israeli regime, the American regime, they attack Iran. Yet when you look at the BBC or CNN, let alone other media outlets, it's Iran that's being condemned, just like it was the case during the 12-day war. And I think, however, if those who have open eyes, when they look at this, and of course those who are politically aware are not always the majority, usually far from it, but those who do have open eyes, that I think is evidence enough that anything that comes from the West when it comes to Iran should be seriously questioned. And the demonization of Iran during the last 47 years, I think, should be discredited by anyone who understands how Western media works. When you see that despite negotiating, despite on 2 occasions, 8-9 months ago and now, despite negotiations, and despite the American side pretending to be serious about negotiations, on both occasions they carry out a blitzkrieg attack, slaughter many innocent people, yet the Western media, Western think tanks, Western elites collectively condemn Iran. Of course, we can also add to that the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and now the genocidal attacks on Lebanon again. When the war in Lebanon started, I was in Beirut, and I witnessed how entire apartment blocks were destroyed, and the Western journalists based in Beirut would call these Hezbollah strongholds. These were apartment blocks that ordinary people lived in. Many families lived in each one of them, but in order to justify the mass murder and the destruction of the assets of families, Western journalists based in Beirut who have fixers who are from those neighborhoods, who have drivers who are from those neighborhoods, who have connections who are from those neighborhoods, they know very well that these are not Hezbollah strongholds or Hezbollah targets. They will repeat what needs to be said because that's how they keep their job. And so I think at least for one of the good things that has happened in the last few years, is that increasingly people are waking up to the reality that there's something wrong. Now, they may continue to hate Iran, and we may be still this fanatical, dangerous theocracy that's hell-bent on destroying the world in the eyes of many, because even though they're skeptical about the media, but still, when it comes to the other, which is of a different race or religion or far away, they tend to still accept that part of the narrative, even though they may no longer find the media outlets that are available to be credible. But when it comes to that far away place, they tend to remain with their old views. And that's why we see a lot of Americans repeating the narratives of the state. And in Europe, I'm sure it's the same, although I haven't been following this. But I am optimistic because the very fact that people are questioning, and the very fact that larger numbers of people are actually turning against the narrative. You were kind enough to mention my appearances on different programs over the last couple of days. The very fact that you have these audiences and these and the reactions, which are largely overwhelmingly positive, I think indicates that there is a minority of people that are substantial in number in the West that do see through this propaganda. And outside the West, it's very much larger, it's much larger, the number of people who view the world differently, because Western media, legacy media, or Epstein class controlled media doesn't have the sort of influence. It doesn't have the sort of influence it had before in the West, but outside of the West, it's even less so, because countries are growing in Latin America and Asia, especially in Asia and Africa. They have their own narratives, they have their own media outlets. The West is still influential. Its influence is still very significant, but it's even less influential in the non-Western world than it is today in the West. So there is an awakening. And that is, for me, a sign of hope and optimism. The war, of course, is terrible. I went to Iranian, as I said, I went to Iranian radio and television for the news channel. And I went to I don't go often on Iranian television. I focus on foreign audiences. But I think last year I went to the same news channel or a couple of years ago. And I went there because I thought the interview was there, and I saw broken glass, and then they told me it's not here. They moved. A missile hit the other side of the building, not a very large building, but it was night, so I couldn't see. This is the world that we're living in. And on the way back, there were explosions. When I came back because I've come to a place where there's internet, because right now the Iranians, you have internet in Iran, but it's for Iranian websites and Iranian apps. They've disconnected the international connection yesterday, I think. So I have to come here and then go home and then go to sleep, as it's 1 a.m. right now. So, and on my way here, there were explosions. So my wife called me. She was worried. She thought maybe something had happened to me. So this is how it is right now with people. People, when bombs fall, they don't know if their relatives were killed, or their former neighbors were killed, or their colleagues were killed, or their classmates were killed. You don't know. and then you later on discover that someone that you know was maimed maimed for life or traumatized when the bombs explode and people are shaking in fear and little children are shaking in fear. That has a long-term effect on all of them. And this is what the Israeli regime and the Trump regime, and of course the Biden regime beforehand, and previous presidents as well, this is what they've brought upon this part of the world. They've destroyed this part of the world. If you look back, regardless of the existence of the Israeli regime and what it did to the Palestinians, but Afghanistan, right now there are sounds of explosions. I don't know if you hear them. They struck parliament just a couple of hours ago. Striking the parliament building. That's quite stunning. But another explosion. So Afghanistan, 40, let's say 48, 49, 50 years ago, it was not a tribal, well, it was a country with tribes and so on, but the literacy rate in Afghanistan actually, if I'm not mistaken, was higher than Iran during the Shah. The infant mortality rate in Afghanistan was better than in Iran. And again, another explosion. And in Iraq, the same was true. So our region, I'm sure it had its many problems, obviously, but it wasn't the wreck that we see today. Afghanistan torn apart, Pakistan left behind. Why is Pakistan left behind? Because the United States and the Saudis funded Al-Qaeda and Wahhabism and Salafism, and that extremism tainted Pakistani society as well as Afghanistan. And then they supported Saddam Hussein, and then they turned against Saddam Hussein, destroyed Iraq, then Syria. Now we see, some people are waking their eye, opening their eyes to what really happened in Syria. When we were fighting in Syria, we weren't fighting for Assad. Iran couldn't care less if Assad was a Sunni or an Alawite or a Christian. What Iran was standing against was this conspiracy of Wahhabi groups. A bomb is about to explode because I can hear the missile. Salafi and Wahhabi groups that were trained by NATO countries, Erdogan in Turkey, Abdullah in Jordan. You know all of this. I'm just saying that what I'm trying to say is that from Afghanistan to Libya, Palestine aside, it wasn't as nearly as horrible as it is now. So many of these countries, Yemen, once upon a time was a country which thrived in its own way. And Sudan, it was a large country which was divided and then divided, and now they're trying to divide it again. The world was a different place. True, the Cold War was Africa, for example, was a place where the United States and the Soviet Union were using it as a chessboard. But in our part of the world, at least, things were relatively better. So the United States has done nothing but played an immensely destructive role. And yet they tell their people that we are the good guys and they're bad. So the Iranians, after the revolution, they are fanatical, crazy extremists that are hell-bent on destroying the world.
And Professor,
that narrative sticks.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but do you think that the goal or the real strategic goal is, like a question we have here in Ireland is often, is it Greater Israel? Is that the strategic goal? Sorry. I can't hear. I shouldn't have been.
That's okay.
It's been frozen. Something has happened there.
I shouldn't have interrupted.
Well, perhaps there's been an explosion. If he's still alive, Can I speak, Roger?
Yes, Colin.
Okay. Comrades, we've gone
Can
through
hear.
this. Yeah.
I just want, I can hear bombing. I just want to know, Professor
This-
Marandi, can you hear us? Hello?
This image is frozen on this. However emotional that is, but look, we don't know. But can we, just for this conversation,
Yes,
and
Colin, go ahead.
salute the professor and the resolution of the Iranian people to and their resistance. We're Irish people. We came from the Middle East. Our culture, every heritage that we have emerged from there, and the center of learning of humanity. Now, the problem that we're having in this conversation is that, and I've watched the good people, the educated people of what they call the Middle East, who provided the learning of the word, appeal to Western, so-called Western societies, and asking them to do the right thing. Now, if you go back to the history, Sahib, you would go back to the history of Salah ad-Din and know the pillage and plunder, and Europe, the place we live in, that we exist in so much privilege in, is based on the pillage and the plunder and lies and distortion, murder, rape, and carnage for 1,000 years. That is our history. Now, we benefit from that. We're part of that distortion, but we're also victims of that distortion. Now, we can go back into every battle and every right and every wrong of that, but we must know what is the dynamic force in these battles. Otherwise, we will appeal to the oppressor at every time, thinking that they would do the right thing. They will never do the right thing. We must understand the dynamic force here in our world is capitalism. And that is the system that we live under. That is the oppressive force we live under everywhere. And capitalism is what we are witnessing now, is just the consequences and the inevitable consequences of capitalism. And capitalism has picked off its enemies from Ireland to Venezuela to every part of the world, every local community, every woman who's oppressed anywhere, and every child who's been denied any right. That is what capitalism does to maximize its profit. Donald Trump said today, we are trying to understand this war, and you good people are asking for rights and wrongs, disputing reports from Western propagandists, disputing the reports in a ridiculous effort that will get us nowhere. Donald Trump openly says, and this is the mouthpiece of capitalism, because the man has no brains, but he's just a mouthpiece. What he says today is, we have more guns than you. We, meaning the capitalist elite. And they have, their interest is to increase capital. They will do it everywhere and anywhere they can. The pretense and the bullshit that it was some kind of a law, an ordered society, they've dropped that. They don't need to pretend it anymore. They're not going to pretend it anymore. So watch them and watch this narrative about the UN has to be attacked. Any kind of pretense of law and rules-based society is gone. And they're getting rid of it, and they're attacking, and they've attacked. In Ireland, we are silenced. There's no war in Ireland against imperialism. Irish people have surrendered. Irish people are more concerned about their privileged children living in Dubai or somewhere in the Gulf than they are about the death of children in Iran. So this is what's happening. Capitalism is on the march. It sees a weakened working class movement all throughout the world, and it is out for the slaughter. It's heading for China, which is really its only obstacle to complete and utter control. Now, the problem they have is they can kill everybody, but they depend on us to feed them. They depend on the world economy to feed them. Now, if they collapse the economy in the middle of their slaughter, but it's, the maxim in capitalism is that economics and the profit of the market should be the preeminent thing. But these mad fuckers in this part of capital, I don't know what part of capital it is, but it's just, it's reverted to colonialism, a form of colonialism that we haven't seen since the First World War, where they just gouge and take and plunder. Now, the question is, they have a problem. If they collapse the capitalist economy, that is their problem. Any concerns about humanity are ridiculous, and we would be foolish and childish to think and appeal to them on that basis. What people need to understand is start to understand and learn the dynamics of capitalism, and find our strength wherever we can. But it is a violent, aggressive force, and it will never be redressed without some rising up of the working class throughout the world. Now, sadly, I am not as optimistic as other speakers have been here. If you watch, they've picked off every resistance throughout the world in the last time, in my lifetime. If you went back to the Vietnam and saw all of the multiple possibilities within the world. But we need to get away, comrades. We need to get away from understanding this world in terms of national oppression. Because what they do is, what capitalism does is isolates us into in our particular parts of the world, and then feeds us a narrative about the isolation and attacking us within our countries. Now, even within the Middle East, so-called Middle East, watch that. You would think that should show some solidarity, but who is supporting? Sorry, we need to go stop this. I need to stop. So.
Professor Marandi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Can you come back in? We thought we had lost.
Yeah, sure. I know I've spoken a lot, and it's about I came late, and it's 1:17 a.m. here. I just wanted to add a couple of points, and then if you permit, I'll leave. The point that I think is most important that I should add is that because you said what is the ultimate objective, and I think it's very clear that the ultimate objective is complete hegemony over West Asia and parts of North Africa by the Israeli regime. And what the U.S. ambassador said, I think, was clearly unofficial U.S. policy, unofficial European policy, the unofficial policy of the West. Just like the two-state solution, which was always taught across Europe as the Israeli regime was colonizing the West Bank, I think that was also the official policy was a two-state solution. But from the beginning, literally or almost, the unofficial policy was to allow the Israeli regime to colonize the West Bank and to use the narrative of the two-state solution to draw attention away from the fact that the Europeans and the West, but mostly the Europeans and the Canadians and the Australians, not necessarily so much the United States, to draw attention away from criticism towards them. They would say, well, we're seeking a two-state solution. So while Palestine was being colonized, they could say that, well, we don't agree with this, we are pursuing a two-state solution, but in reality, they were always allowing the Israelis to colonize. And what we're seeing today is the US ambassador telling the truth, as we see in the flag of the Israeli regime. It is from the Euphrates to the Nile. That is their ultimate goal. And of course, when they reach those waters, the areas beyond those waters are also going to be Amalek, and therefore they have to be subjugated as well. That, I think, is clear, is the objective. And there was no rebuke. He was not removed. The Secretary of State or the White House did not criticize his statement. So I think it's fair, very fair to say that that is his that his position is the position of the government of the United States, not formally but informally.
And Professor, you mentioned Afghanistan in the past. What is your assessment of the relationship between Afghanistan now and Iran?
Well, the interesting thing is, and I'm sure you know this better than I, that Iran is depicted as if it was the Taliban, or if it was ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And in reality, it was the West that helped create the Taliban through the Saudis. Now, it evolved a bit, not necessarily that much, but the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they were deeply influenced by the US Soviet Union Cold War. And you're all politically aware. I don't want to get into the fact that even before the Soviet Union invaded, it was the United States that started funding so-called Mujahideen in Afghanistan to encourage the Soviet Union to invade. So it was really the Americans, this American government, that set this trap. So they were sacrificing the country of Afghanistan, which, as I said, was not this broken country, totally undeveloped 40, 50 years ago. It was actually a country that was in many ways doing better than Iran at that time. And of course, Iran wasn't doing great, but it was better than Iran on the whole. But they destroyed it. So the Taliban was a direct and indirect creation of US policy. The Taliban today, our relationship with it is complicated because it is the reality on the ground in Afghanistan. And the Iranians do provide aid to Afghanistan. We provide them. We allow fuel to get in, which is subsidized. We allow grains to get in, which are subsidized. But, and that, of course, Iran uses as leverage so that they would put less pressure on minorities like the Tajiks or the Hazaras, who are Hazaras or Shia. The Tajiks are Persian language speakers, the Uzbeks. So the relationship is complex, but as you see, the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan is quite bad between the Taliban and the Pakistan, despite the fact that it was the Pakistani government that, at the behest of the West, with Saudi money and Emirati money as well back then, that created the Taliban, and now the Taliban has become a problem for Pakistan. So our borders are calm and quiet. Trade goes through. Afghanistan is in very bad shape. Iran provides a lot of scholarships for, well, a significant number of scholarships for Afghan girls who study at home or get an education somehow. But the relationship is complicated.
And If we're looking
Okay.
ahead and we're looking at the capabilities of Iran's ability to defend itself, well, and the I suppose inevitable escalation from Israel, what do you think of the chances of Israel going nuclear, using tactical nuclear bombs? Do you think that's
I don't know. That's not something that I can predict. But the very fact that people raise this question shows the nature of the Israeli regime. Because for any sane person, a nuclear weapon would be something that we wouldn't even want to ever contemplate. But the fact that so many people talk about the Israeli regime using a nuclear weapon shows what sort of ideology exists there. It shows what sort of how they view non-Zionist Jews as subhuman, and therefore they celebrate their murder. As we spoke, I mean, during this program, I heard the sound of multiple explosions, and I got cut off. It didn't affect this building, but maybe if something shook and something was damaged and we were disconnected, I don't know. But during this period that we've been talking, I assume a number of people have been killed in Tehran. So this is how the Israeli regime works. This is how the United States works, and there's not going to be any blowback from
Seyed?
the Western media.
Saeed, could I ask you, the American aggression is openly saying that their purpose is regime change, okay, and they are saying clearly that they're prepared to deplete and attack from the air, and from their superiority militarily, Iran indefinitely, as they are with Lebanon, and they did with Syria, and they've done with Libya, but etc. etc. Now, it appears the Jews are next on their map. Now, for them to actually achieve regime change, and this is the propaganda that we are hearing. They're bringing out all of the reactionaries from Shah's times and other people who have left Iran, and they're putting small little street protests on the line. But what will happen if, as it looks like, that the revolutionary Iran can't win this war in terms of their superiority and all of that? So what will happen on the ground, given that America is unlikely, nor the Israelis would even dare to attempt to put boots on the ground? But what will happen in the event of ongoing attacks in almost in the way that it's happening in Lebanon and other places? What do you anticipate, or what do the people think, or what can we anticipate this situation?
I believe that the United States and the Israeli regime will be dealt a strategic defeat. The damage that they're doing to Iran is substantial, but Iran's firepower should not be underestimated. And Iran has been preparing itself for this moment for decades, ever since the US invasion of Iraq, when Iran was then right before called Axis, and Iran was surrounded effectively. So they've been developing these underground missile and drone bases, which are mostly directed towards the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean rather than towards Israel. And we're seeing right now how the Persian Gulf has become a big problem. Iran's no longer allowing them to export oil or gas, and there's nothing the Americans can do about it. They can bomb my home, they can bomb this building, this studio. So far, they've been unable to do anything about oil and gas. And if push comes to shove, if things escalate, then that oil and gas will no longer be available, because those ships can be targeted, and those oil and gas facilities can be destroyed. And of course, there's the Iranians have a justification, because these countries have all allowed the United States to use bases on their land to wage war against Iran. We saw 3 American planes shot down, where they said that the Kuwaitis shot them down. Well, regardless of who shot them down, I mean, if they shot them down themselves, that's not exactly a very good sign. It's not much. I would rather say that the enemy shot down my planes, but anyway. But the fact that they were shot down over Kuwait means that Kuwaiti airspace, in addition to the bases on the ground, that Kuwaiti airspace is being used by the United States. So Iran would have justification. So right now, Iran does not want escalation. Iran does not want to destroy the global economy. So it's preventing oil from being taken or gas from being taken from the Persian Gulf region. But if there's escalation, they can go much further. So, and then if there's destruction in the Persian Gulf region, if at some point there's a ceasefire or cessation of hostilities, there will be no oil to export or gas, or there won't be any ships to take them. So, and that would create a global economic crisis, a depression that would not end well for the West. It would be that catastrophic for the world, and it would be painful for Iranians, of course. But at the end of the day, if you're fighting for your survival, which Iran is, then these are the steps that you may have to take. So I don't see a scenario where the Americans win. I believe they will lose, but I think we're going to see pretty dark days ahead. If I could just add one point, if you can hear me, and then if it's okay, I'll leave. One thing that in the West, and again, I know that this group you're all very politically aware, and there's not much that I can add to it, if anything. But with regards to the popularity of the state and the revolution in Iran, I think the events in Tehran over the last 48 hours or let's say 60, 70 hours have shown that actually the state has popular legitimacy. Not only have polls throughout the years shown this clearly, even polls by the University of Maryland, which are regular, well, until recently they were regularly carried out in Iran. I don't know if in the last couple of years they've been active, but the sheer number of people on the streets under airstrikes protesting against the United States and supporting the Islamic Republic of Iran is quite extraordinary. If you go to my Telegram channel, you will see I posted images of rallies last night. Tonight's rallies, they say, were bigger, but I was very busy. I haven't checked myself. But there were millions of people on the streets of Tehran in different squares. They didn't all gather in one place for security reasons, but across the city, and each one of them was huge. So the West, that narrative that they have constructed of Iran runs against reality. And I think that the Iranians today are more steadfast as a whole. There are, of course, people who despise the Islamic Republic of Iran and Iran. There are people who support the West, who've always supported the West, of course. In Lebanon, you have people who are totally against the resistance. And everywhere, in Palestine, in the West Bank, you have the Palestinian Authority. But in any case, I think that after the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei, people have become hardened even further. And I think that was a major miscalculation by the United States and the Israeli regime. But time will tell, and we'll have to wait a few weeks to see how things play out. But despite the darkness, I don't see a scenario where Trump will be able to claim victory, unless it's the sort of victory that he claimed when he walked away from Yemen. But of course, the price that will be paid in Iran is much greater, and the price that the Iranians are paying is quite significant. But we all have to do what we have to do. I won't keep you if it's okay. And
Absolutely.
it's 1:33 a.m. and I have to get some sleep. Yeah, and we'll have to see what happens tonight. But I wish you all well, and pray for Iran, and I pray that all of you have excellent days and months and years ahead of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Professor Marandi, thank you very much for your time, for your dignity. I said it's an honor to be in your company. I urge everyone to follow you, to follow the message, and we must all we have a duty to counter this sickening Western narrative that is the complete opposite and the antithesis to the reality. And you embody that, Professor Mohammad. We are, Marandi, we're so pleased and delighted, and we also pray for your safety, and for the people, and you give us hope. Iran gives us hope, because we're living in very hopeless times, and it's a terrible, terrible sacrifice that has to be paid. But we salute you, and
Thank you.
we look forward to better times. We'll end the conversation now.
Brother,
Bye-bye.
I want to send my condolences to you and to the Iranian people, but I want to say as well, congratulations for the great martyrdom of Imam Khamenei, the days will prove his martyrdom will bring global change, not just local change. Please take care, and we love you and we respect you, brother, so much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a very good day. Bye for now.
Care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. We're able to stay on, Seyed, if you are, maybe for 5 or 10 minutes.
No problem.
Maybe decompress. That wasn't easy for lots of reasons. The logistics weren't great, whatever, but it's just brilliant to be in his company.
the area he's in, it's been under bombardment for the last half an hour. There is a lot of explosions around him, and I can't see in Telegram channels what's happening in that area. So it's not easy. God protect him, and God will protect the people. Since he's right and you are right, those people, they just, like they proved it in Gaza and Lebanon, and that even Hezbollah never targeted the civilian or the resistant Palestinian civilian. These people goes after kids, kindergartens, primary schools, hospitals, incubators, departments of premature babies, and all of that. And they try to show the international community as they having the high moral ground at the same time. These are criminals, and whatever we'll say, it cannot pay justice to their description. The people, and this is one of the reasons I mentioned earlier on. The leader in Iran couldn't go in hiding while their people and they're going about their lives. Their kids is going to schools, the nurses going to hospitals, and they attacked up till 9 hospitals up till today in Iran. This is the infrastructure they are about. They are attacking police stations, security stations, departments of governmental kind of departments, and hospitals, and in educational institutions, and then maybe the rest of the industrial base and stuff like that. But as brother Muhammad, Professor Muhammad Marandi was saying, those people are being prepared to face the United States of America for a long time, and United States of America, who couldn't win a war in Vietnam, and as he said, brought mujahideen in Afghanistan to bring Afghanistan as a hub for the defeat of the Soviet Union, revenge of Vietnam defeat, and then we paying for this price at the same time. As was saying that before, every few years, if you notice in that region, there is like mowing the lawns policy committed by the United States of America and the West. And when I say the West, you can see the French fingerprint, the British, the major players as well with the United States, the Germans, the one who fund and supplies the arms, and all of these guys are involved right now with the United States of America. All the military bases of the United States of America in that area is being destroyed, and they asked the British to facilitate their Bahrain base, their Cyprus base, and the others. And today's stormers allowed everything from yesterday. They were ready, and the American airplanes landing in there, and using the British. So all of them are involved in the destruction of Iran. But the Iranian people, as Professor Muhammad said, they are adamant. But I want to allude to a point Morgan mentioned about the attack in Dubai. He said maybe the Russians or the Chinese give the new technologies for them to have real intelligence. I want to just remind you and remind others, the Iranian managed to using and kind of the as they call infiltrate the signals of the United States of America to its drones, to down a lot of drones like Q490 and stuff like that, and they reverse engineered. So the Iranian they are very advanced in nanotechnology. They have you see, the Iranian are graduating every year around 360,000 scientists in different fields of science. The only country in Europe can match that number or come close to it is Germany, and maybe United States of America as well, and Japan. So Iran is advanced in education and in that, and they done that while they are being blockaded and besieged. And you see, the people, once they are denied the right for life, they create life. Watch what happened in Gaza under a blockade. They denied the Gazans having even milk for their own babies. They built Gaza to be like a paradise, even under a blockade. This is the love of life, which the people in that region want: dignity and to live in peace, and they love life. But they are not going to be submitting to the Zionists or submitting to the Americans if they will pay their life a price, because people won't risk to live without dignity in there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seyed Shaf, as well. I'm glad you're able to get in there before he left as well. I think the understanding that you share, and I find this quite often with non-Westerners, is a very different level of understanding. We might say, you know, well, we weren't colonizers in Ireland, but I think what I'm sure you see in other comrades who are not Western comrades are so surprised at the colonized brain, even of those who claim to be anti-imperialist, and even the concept of martyrdom, Saib, is so like it's sad to say it in Ireland, that it's still something that a lot of people cannot fathom. But like you say, the love of life is so strong that people are prepared to die for the cause. And it's hard, it's very, very hard, I have to say, sitting here tonight, to think of, you know, how little, you know, desire there is to sacrifice, even here. You know, and we certainly, it was one of the most evident things that became apparent to us at the UCD encampment, that people kind of are a bit surprised at this idea of sacrifice, and yet the sacrifice, you know, that others pay for ultimately the freedom of humanity and for humanity, please God, is so huge in other countries. And then to see the dignity of people like Professor, you know, who spoke, Professor Marandi, you know, who spoke so calmly while all of that is happening around him. I think it's been a long evening. It wasn't the smoothest of programs that we've had on a Monday. Whenever, you know, we usually we think we're not prepared, or there could be hiccups along the way. Tonight was particularly disruptive, but just even to have, you know, like that he showed up and that he took time to be with us, and you can see he's exhausted. So I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Seyed Shaf every week, to Barry Murray every week of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, to Colin and other Peadar O'Donnell comrades as well, who make all of this possible and who make education, who put it at the forefront in Ireland, because we've a lot to learn. and we shouldn't fool ourselves in thinking that we know everything, because the minute you think you know everything is the minute you should give up. It's a foolish thing to think you know everything. We have an awful lot to learn, and I hope you come back, Seyed, and I hope that we continue to do this and that others will come back as well. There's always been time for Q&A. Tonight it's just too late. It's getting very late. People are tired. But come back next week, next Monday. We'll always be here, and we will continue to learn, to question, to hold each other to account. We're not afraid of criticism either, and we all make mistakes. Nobody is the fountain of all knowledge. So thank you everybody for coming again, and good night. Free Palestine, long live Iran, and
long live
victory
Iran, free Palestine.
to Iran.
Take care.
Slán
Thank
go
you.
fóill. Thank you. Say that because